Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up. Joe Samaniego here, along with Ben Schneider, Matthew Bro, and Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. And a big welcome to our Patreon subscribers, calling the show Mark and Robin, and our newest member, David. You too can invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. Invest each month. Help us get members to the track, especially once we hit the goal of $500 a month. And of course, you could do a one-time contribution through Buy Me a Coffee. You set the amount. You could even send an investment, a cup of coffee, to a particular on-air personality. Help them get to the track, and they'll thank you on the air. And overall, we encourage everyone, the easiest way to support the Grid Network, subscribe to us right here on YouTube. Hit the thumbs up, like our video, and then comment. And if you're in the chat room watching us live, be sure to share your questions and opinions. We'll share it on the air. And overall, a lot to talk about, especially been NASCAR Cup Series at Phoenix, a very big, important race weekend, because we know this could be sort of a setup of what we will see in the championship race later on.
Well, Joe, we almost had a peanut butter burger celebration for three colleagues here for Pick a Winner. I understand it's a reference to the pre-race show that I missed yesterday, but we'll leave it at that. Late caution denied Kevin Harvick what appeared to be another win at Phoenix, so he did extend that remarkable top 10 streak that he has going at that track. William Byron, however, took his second win in a row, but third of four races this year to go into overtime. Byron dominated stage one and again looked fast from the start, though he lost the lead in a stage break on pit road to his Hendrick teammate Kyle Larson. Larson won stage two ahead of Byron and finished fourth. All four Hendrick Motorsports cars in the top 10 today. Kobe, we'll start with you. With Byron being the first repeat winner of 2023, he's been fast 2 weeks in a row. Is he now a favorite for three in a row at Atlanta?
Well, Ben, look at what happened last year. Who won this race last year in Atlanta coming up? William Byron. So I think he has a really good opportunity to go three in a row here in 2023. But at the same time, looking at what type of racing we see at Atlanta nowadays, you need a lot of things that go in your favor. It's basically a Daytona, Talladega style track, a mini version of it. So a lot of things can and will go wrong there. So he's going to need a lot more luck to get three in a row there, than he needed today in Phoenix. But overall, this is the William Byron we really expected to see when he got to the NASCAR Cup Series. It took him several years of running in Cup competition to get to this level, but he's finally there. And I think William Byron has proven to us that we should take him seriously as one of the top drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series. And it's been incredible watching him grow over the years as a Cup Series driver. And I think William Byron is ready to be in the conversation as one of the top drivers we have at NASCAR's highest level.
Yeah, absolutely. I can agree with that. I feel like when we talk about Hendrick Motorsports overall, we talk about Kyle Larson and we talk about Chase Elliott and them being as great as they are, but we failed to talk about Alex Bowman and William Byron, who are really great drivers as well. But in terms of favorites, I mean, yes, William Byron is fast. He won Atlanta last season. He also is the first driver, or actually in the next gen era, he is the driver who has won, first driver to reach 2 wins. So last season, he obviously was the first driver to win 2 races in the first 6 or 7 races, and then he does it again this season. However, in terms of Atlanta, William Byron actually has the worst average finish of his Hendrick Motorsports teammates in the last recent races there, so about 5 races. Alex Bowman's actually up there with a 12.2 average finish at Atlanta. Kyle Larson has a 15.8, and then Chase Elliott actually has a 12 average finish, but William Byron has an 18.4 average finish with 1 win, which was his lone top 5 there. However, I feel like we continue to underestimate William Byron this season, so it would not shock me when the odds come out, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for him to be the favorite for this race, just showing how dominant he has been this season. And it wouldn't surprise me if he continues to win races.
And of course, important to remember, Byron won the spring race at Atlanta last year. So we move on to a driver who, like you mentioned, Kobe, might be in a situation right now that Byron was in a few years ago when he first started in the Cup Series. The last caution came out with a single car spin from Harrison Burton. Now, Burton has had a rough start to the season. He finished 15th at Auto Club, but has 3 finishes outside the top 20, including today's dismal 35th out of 36 cars. So, Matthew, could today's race have some at Ford wondering if Burton was rushed to Cup too soon, and could this put some more pressure on him to perform sooner rather than later?
I feel yes and no. I feel like Kevin Harvick might be a little upset because I believe Harrison Burton's actually a Kevin Harvick Incorporated driver in terms of his agency. So I thought that was a very interesting thing. But I mean, granted, he's only made 41 starts. Just the issue is, from what we've seen from Harrison Burton, is only 2 top 10 finishes compared to, I remember his 2020 Xfinity Series season when he had 4 wins and really took the series by storm. Now, just 3 years later, it's very rare to find him up near the top 10. And I believe before this race, he had an average finish of like 22nd this year, around there. So I would be a little worried if I was Harrison Burton. But at the same time, when you look at the 21 car, besides Ryan Blaney winning a race and besides Trevor Bayne winning the Daytona 500, this car has not really won a race since Elliott Sadler back in the early 2000s. So I wouldn't fully throw this at Harrison Burton for him underperforming, considering the car really hasn't performed, as in the Wood Brothers number 21 car is what I mentioned. Even with Penske assistance, it has not performed as well as the history behind the Wood Brothers car has. So I think, yes, this does show that that Harrison Burton, we talk about William Byron so much, he keeps getting in my head. But in terms of Harrison Burton, with him being rushed, I would say maybe a little bit, but it's only been 41 starts, and you don't want to see him rushed out so quickly like many drivers have in the past, especially with Ford. And then Toyota is one of those teams that comes to mind that has been rushing drivers out.
Yeah, I think Harrison Burton might have been rushed up to Cup a year or two too soon. I felt like he probably needed another year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but hey, this Cup ride became available, and he decided to take it. And it is as you said, Matthew, the Wood Brothers have an alliance with Team Penske. They've had an alliance with them for a while now. So when you're in a car that's Penske equipment, people are going to expect you to go out and perform because it's considered, one of the more competitive cars in the series. And nowadays in sports, you don't get a lot of time to develop like we used to in the past. You don't get like 4 or 5 years running in the Cup level to develop. And just like in football, you don't get your entire rookie contract to develop as an NFL quarterback. It's a "what have you done for me lately" type of thing. And it seems like that the amount of time that all of these, drivers and athletes used to get to develop, they don't have it anymore because all the sponsors and teams are expecting you to go out and perform. And certainly when you drive for an iconic organization like the Wood Brothers, there's certainly going to be a lot of pressure on you to perform. And I think looking at Harrison Burton's rookie year in Cup, really what you'd expect out of a rookie, you have some crashes, some mistakes here and there. And in year 2, you really want to turn it on and learn from it. So it's still really early in the season, and there's a lot of time for Harrison Burton to show all of the things he learned in his very first season of running full-time in Cup.
So I look at Harrison Burton and I think back to William Byron's rookie season, and he only had 4 top 10s driving in a Hendrick Motorsports car. And again, there's always that debate, is the Wood Brothers car really just a de facto 4th team Penske car? You can go back to the last couple of drivers, Matt DiBenedetto, Paul Menard, they never won in that car. Ryan Blaney won once, Trevor Bayne won once. But like you said, Matthew, that car, despite its alliances over the years, it hasn't had a lot of success in recent years. So I don't, despite the alliance with Penske now, obviously Penske is a very good team. I don't know that I would put it at the same level as a Hendrick Motorsports at this present time in NASCAR Cup Series racing here. But I think this is a common theme that we have, as fans on social media. It's so easy to, just spew your opinions out there, immediately and proclaim it to the world and everything. I think a lot of times we get caught up in that, and we get caught up in, proclaiming drivers to be busts or saying that, they don't belong in the Cup Series. They were rushed up here too soon. We need to get them out of there and make way for, the next young talent or, maybe an older veteran to come in and try to rework the team. It is very hard to jump into a car in any series, let alone the Cup Series, the top level of NASCAR racing, and start performing at a level that is capable of competing for wins and championships right away. I don't think anybody, it's fair to put those level of expectations on anybody here. And we do have the same thing with, truck drivers and Xfinity drivers as well, but especially in the Cup Series, just the amount of talent, the amount of competition that we see there. I think we really need to give drivers time to develop and learn. So I think it would be quite harsh if Harrison Burton found himself out of a Cup ride at the end of this season. At the same time, a race like today is absolutely dismal, and you would want to see better than this, obviously, on a weekly basis. I know everybody's, allowed an off weekend here or there, but, today was obviously absolutely terrible for him. But I think we need to give Harrison Burton the rest of his sophomore season here to really learn the next-gen car to develop into the Cup Series, and then we can start, making our, projections as to where he's going to be, 3 to 5 years down the road. But I think it's too early to give any sort of bust label. I mean, Kobe, Matthew, the kid's our age, for crying out loud. He's born in the 2000s. He and Todd Gilliland. And by the way, we can point to Todd Gilliland as well, who was in a Rick Ware car today. Zane Smith was in his usual 38 car, Gilliland's usual car, that is. I think that whole deal's been a little unfair to Todd as well, because, what is Todd expected to do in a front row motorsports car? I know Zane has won truck championship and is proclaimed to be a next great superstar here in the series if the opportunities line up for him. But, I think it's kind of unfair to Todd Gilliland, the deal that he's gotten as well. So, I think we just need to give drivers more time to get up to speed. And Harrison Burton certainly should be no exception here. He proved his talent in the Xfinity Series, like you mentioned, Matthew, winning all those races in 2020. I think he's a good driver. I think he just needs some more time to get used to the Cup Series, and we could see him take that step forward later this season potentially. We'll just have to wait and see. Well, let's stick with the Ford theme here. 3 Fords finished in the top 10 with Ryan Blaney, Harvick, and Chase Briscoe. Ross Chastain appeared for a potential top 5 as well, but he and Denny Hamlin made contact on the last lap, ending up 24th and 23rd, respectively. Now, Logano, who won here in November on his way to the championship, finished in 11th, right behind Josh Berry, who had a top 10 finish for Hendrick Motorsports, stubbing for Chase Elliott. A much-needed good run for him after he struggled last weekend. Kobe, with the new aero-package, did the race play out as you expected, and were there any surprises from drivers up front or not up front to you?
I think the race was as good as it could have been. Saw a lot of passing throughout the field. Saw Kevin Harvick be able to work through traffic at the pit stops and make that great move on Kyle Larson to take the lead there before the unfortunate caution came out and ruined the race. Yeah, so I think for this being the first race of the new aero package, I think NASCAR can be satisfied with what we saw, but also we need to wait to see what is it going to look like when we get to other places like a Richmond or a Martinsville. I think once we get a little deeper into the season, get a few more races under this package, we'll have a pretty good idea of what we have. And you also asked, were there any surprises from drivers up front versus not up front? It was looking at Tyler Reddick, finishing in the top 5, considering the start of the season that he's had. That's a really big win for that team, 23-11 racing. And also got to give a call to the driver who finished 10th, Josh Berry, considering where he was last week at Las Vegas, all the way to now at Phoenix. He certainly has to feel really, really good about himself and the performance that he had. Josh Berry, I believe he averaged a running position of 18th place all race long, and he was able to take advantage of the chaos of NASCAR overtime, get up there and finish in the top 10, and having an entire week to prepare really make sure that Berry was as prepared as he could be for this. And today was a really good showing from him of what he can do.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I think the only thing that honestly surprised me was Josh Berry running in 10th. I mean, that's no discredit to Hendrick Motorsports. All of their cars finished in the top 10, with Alex Bowman once again finishing in the top 10, the only driver to finish in the top 10 in the past 4 races. But if you really look at the results, I really don't see any surprises. I mean, Byron, Blaney, Reddick up there. Granted, Reddick has had a lack of a better term, terrible start to the season, despite being so dominant with Richard Childress last year winning 3 races. But Larson, Harvick, Bell, maybe Briscoe with the lack of pace I think Stuart Haas has shown, besides with Kevin Harvick. I think him running up 7th might not be a surprise, considering he has like an average finish of, 4th, something along those lines in the next gen races here at the track. He has finished in the top 4, and then he finished 4th, and then finished 7th. So the pretty good finishes for Chase Briscoe. And somebody, I guess, who did surprise me, I guess the drivers who finished 22nd, 23rd, and 24th was Suarez, Hamlin, and Chastain. I was quite surprised that they didn't finish up front, because they were running up front all day. But then I saw the incident, because I was looking at the unofficial results on my TV screen, and I'm like, where did Chastain and Hamlin go? But then I realized that Hamlin and Chastain made contact, hit the wall, finished the last two cars on the lead lap. But in terms of the passing and everything, this seems like a win to NASCAR in terms of what happened. Not many incidents towards the final, 15 laps of the entire race. So really went very smoothly. I think the Fox coverage did pretty well. I know a lot of people have been bashing it lately, but I wasn't upset at all during this race. I really did enjoy it as a fan and as someone who covers motorsport. But I would say yes to answer your question with a long answer, is I think it did play out as expected, and there weren't really too many surprises, except I think Josh Berry running first career top 10. Congrats to him in just, I believe, 5 Cup Series starts. So, or 4, it'd be 4, sorry. Pretty awesome, though, and congrats to Josh Berry, and congrats to William Byron as well.
Well, on that note regarding Fox, Matthew, I understand we might have a comment.
Yeah. So we lost Ben for a moment. So we got there. So I'll take this over. Casey Campbell saying, "What? Oh yeah, we can. Yeah, we can.
Sorry, you know what I did? I tried to swipe over to another tab, and I with the way my MacBook settings are, it went to the previous web page, so I got kicked out of the studio there. So sorry about that. I don't know how much I missed, Kobe. If you were in the middle of answering that, I'll let you continue.
Oh no, I wouldn't answer. I was just reading Casey's question. What are your thoughts on Mike Joy's commercial jab? I know, Ben, you have a lot to say on that, so I'll let you answer that question.
Sure. Well, obviously, I think Kobe might be mentioning the tweet that I sent out. I caught the I didn't catch the comment live because I was trying to keep up with some college basketball stuff as well. But I think that obviously Mike Joy's in a tough position because I get that he wants to defend his employer and everything. But I didn't really understand where he was coming from with this one, because I think, the controversy regarding Fox hasn't been Mike Joy. I mean, Mike Joy is a living legend of this sport, and I think has very few detractors. If anything, I think people consider him one of the few bright spots of the Fox coverage still left. This wasn't, I think he's taken a lot of this personally, and I think that's a shame, because I don't think that's really what all this is about here. And I don't even know if it's Fox Sports. I think, a lot of stuff has come out about the way this business model works, and people see that, NASCAR is charging Fox, a ton of money for the rights to broadcast these races. And so there's really no other option but to sell, way more commercial time. And I think the fans would enjoy, particularly in light of what ESPN and Sky do with the Formula One coverage, where there are no commercial breaks. I think that it's a business model issue that, if there's ever a good time to talk about it, it's right now, when we have 2 years left of his TV deal and we have contract renewals coming up in 2025. If there were ever a time to modify the business model here and see if we can continue to allow for more advertising and sponsorship in the sport to help make more money while trying to do so in ways that don't interrupt the racing with full screen commercials, when are we ever going to get a better time to talk about that? So I think, of course, on Twitter, you're going to get the people that don't know the full picture, that are the keyboard warriors that Mike Joy was talking about, that are just going to go off and say whatever's on their mind without giving it a second thought. But I think there's been a lot of very constructive criticism, particularly after the Daytona 500. We had that discussion here on Grid Live Encore, after the 500. There's something that needs to change with this business model. The current business model of how many commercials we see, I think, in a lot of minds of the fans, is simply unacceptable. Now, whether that blame goes to Fox or to NASCAR or to both, I think is a whole nother discussion. But, why can't we at least have that conversation here? I don't know that the backhanded, comment that Mike Joy made going into the final full screen commercial break here really does anything to help things. I think, if anything, Nick Bromberg tweeted this as well. If anything, it might turn some fans off and frustrate them even more. So I think it's important to have that conversation.
Yeah, and for me, I agree and disagree with Ben. I know we had some discussions prior.
Sure.
I enjoyed the comment from a fan perspective, like putting those people in their place. But at the same time, I felt the way it was handled might not have been the way it seemed like in his head thinking before he said it. But when you look at the charter system, then you look at the TV deal, they're both, and honestly, garbage. Like the way the system is set up, the way that NASCAR, with the money and the funding and stuff, like a lack of better term, garbage. I apologize to those. But at the same time, when you look at it, I made the joke to Kobe and Joe in the pre-race show after, when Mike Joy tweeted out something about like $25 million per race. I said, I hope they put more commercials out there. How are they going to afford to keep this sport going without those commercials? So, I mean, when presented with new information, I'll change my opinion, obviously. But at the same time, just thinking Mike Joy's comment, I enjoyed it from like a fan perspective, but at the same time, I can understand where it's going to turn off a lot of people. And I don't know if it might have been warranted despite how the race was going. I think Fox Sports was doing a great job. I really think the coverage, and it's like that Michael Jordan meme. Like I took that personally, the 2311 owner. That's why I wanted to throw that reference in. Mike Joy, I see him has been the highlight and the star of Fox Sports coverage since the start of the season, but I feel like he's taking a lot of it personally when he shouldn't. I haven't seen many, and when you look on Twitter where the keyboard warriors are, you see a lot of hate comments towards Fox, but very seldomly do you see Mike Joy's name mentioned in that hate. So that's why I kind of agree and disagree with you, Ben, in terms of that. But I think what he said might not have been the best thing, but like deep down, I might have enjoyed it. But at the same time, I agree with exactly what you said, Ben. Maybe not the right time for that.
Yeah, I think it was good to shut the keyboard warriors up, but maybe, I think at the same time, there's been a lot of constructive criticism there. And I think, it's important not to just completely blow that off as irrelevant and, people that don't know what they're talking about. I think it's important to have that discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely very important to have that discussion. And yeah, my joy isn't the problem at all. It's just, the placement of the commercials and then how many commercials that there are. And I have to say, since the Daytona 500, I think the placement of commercials have been a lot better in the last few weeks. So I don't have much to complain about there moving forward. As you mentioned, been talking about the new TV deal, we can find better ways for placements of those commercials. I wish someone like Mother's Polish would just come on board and we could have commercial-free coverage for all NASCAR races. Or as we've also talked about in the past, we're moving to a streaming world where almost everything that you want to view in the future is going to be through streaming. So if they offered a commercial-free option on Fox Sports Go or whatever, I'm sure a lot of people would be willing to pay however much that would cost to watch free NASCAR coverage year round. I know some people say there's no way nobody would pay for that. I think people would be pleasantly surprised to see how many people would really be willing to, open up their pockets to pay for commercial-free NASCAR coverage. I'm sure everyone at Grid Network probably would as well.
Well, I said it on the Rolex post-race show. I would be perfectly fine with NBC upping the Peacock subscription a couple of bucks a month over the course of a year just for the one time a year to get commercial-free coverage of the Rolex 24 again, because we didn't get that this year. And, of course, we had that whole discussion as well. But, like I said, I don't want to talk too much in circles here. I know we have to move on. But, this is a conversation that I think we're never going to have a better opportunity, at least not for another decade, to have this conversation when we're in this transition period, like you mentioned, Kobe, with going from cable to streaming in many respects. When's a better time than now to at least talk about and see if we can find a solution that works for everybody. So I understand we might have one more comment as well from Chrome Diesel here. I think it's more of a Phoenix thing than being a package thing. NASCAR better start considering putting the finale race somewhere else that is not Phoenix. Yeah, I know we can have that discussion as well. I think, some people are, looking at the restarts and all the chaos there and wondering if this is the best track for the finale in many respects too. Adam Lemery says Chevy is strong this year. Of course, no doubt. They've gotten off to a fantastic start, not just with Hendrick, but, Childress and obviously JTG Doherty even winning the Daytona 500. So very strong start to the year for Chevy. And now we'll move on here and continue the NASCAR Cup portion of this show. Disappointing finish for Brad Keselowski after a strong day. He was in the top 10 for most of the race, but ended up coming home 18th. Chris Buescher, his teammate, was 15th. Still, Keselowski has improved on all his finishes compared to last year, with the exception of the Daytona 500. Matthew, do you think RFK is headed in the right direction, and can Keselowski challenge for the win regularly as we move on in 2023?
Yes and no. Like, I feel like I'm very indecisive, but at the same time, I feel like, yes, this team is absolutely in the right direction. I remember sending it in our Grid Network group me message. I think RFK was having a great day, obviously, before the late cautions that put them back, because they were both running up in the top 13. I think when I sent that message, Brad was in 7th, Christopher Buescher was in 13th, but then they obviously finished 15th and 18th, respectively. But I don't know if we'll see Keselowski contending for as many wins as he did with Penske. Maybe with the next gen, like I say, he's still one of the few drivers besides the Daytona Duels that has not won a regular season points race in this car. But Christopher Buescher, has done such a great job. He won the Bristol race, one that all the tires were exploding. Chris Buescher got it done, and he's been running up front. I think this is a great opportunity for RFK to take that step. I don't want to really say they're only a second-year team because they've been around for quite a while, longer than I've been alive, longer than most of us have been alive. But in terms of the new ownership with Brad Keselowski coming on board to drive the number 6 car, I think they are definitely – like after last season, we looked at it and said they only can go up from here. And so far after 4 races, they are going up. But we still have 32 more to go. But I'm confident in them. I think they can continue up. I don't know if they'll get a win this season with either Buescher or Keselowski, but I think they will contend for these super speedways like Atlanta. Michigan is maybe not a super speedway, but Michigan's always been Brad's favorite track, and then Daytona and Talladega.
Yeah, and Brad Keselowski really wants to win at Michigan very badly in the NASCAR Cup Series because that's his home track. Yes, he wants to win the Daytona 500, but he said himself, it's right, winning at Michigan would be right up there next to winning the Great American Race. But if you're RFK, you at least have to be very pleased with where the program is headed. I think it's headed in the right direction, and I believe we're going to see Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher running much better than they ran in 2022. Because during the first half of the season, just finishing in the top 20 would be considered like a win for their organization because it was really difficult at first. And I agree with Matthew. I don't think we're going to see Brad contending for wins up there as often as he did when he was a driver for Team Penske. But I certainly think today's was a good indication that we could see RFK finishing in the top 10 more, even top 5s, or even getting a win or two later this season. I do think we're going to see RFK win at some point this season. And next week is Atlanta, now a super speedway style track. Anything can happen. Brad and Chris are really good super speedway racers, so it would not surprise me if they're going to be in the mix next week.
RFK, I think, is certainly in the right direction. Of course, it'd be hard to, take a step back from where Roush had been. I mean, they really were at the lowest of low points in that team's history over the last several years. But I think Brad Keselowski's come on board, and it's been a process. They didn't win right out of the gate, last season, unless you count the dual races. But of course, we know those are exhibition races with only half the field. It's been a process to get this team back to, its glory days in Roush's, mid 2000s era. I think they're not there yet, but I think they're certainly trending in that right direction. So we'll be on the lookout for that as 2023 moves along here. One other driver that's been under the radar, but it's off to a good start this year, is Christopher Bell. Bell finished in the top 10 again today, the only race without a top 10 in his season so far being Auto Club. He's also the highest Toyota driver in NASCAR's Cup Series standings right now. Kobe, are you surprised by Bell's impressive start to this season?
No, not at all. I think Christopher Bell is a really strong, consistent driver, and I guess the only thing that people knock Christopher Bell on is he doesn't get up there and take over races and win as often as people think that he should. And another thing that we're going to have to keep an eye on, so far this season we've seen some miscues on pit road with Christopher Bell's pit crew letting him down and losing spots on pit road. And when they made the pit crew swap last year with Bubba Wallace and Christopher Bell's team, we also saw a few issues on Bell's pit crew as well. So I know it's still early in the season, going to have to give them a few more races, but I think if they figure out what's been going on pit road during the first few races this season, they'll be all right. But otherwise, Christopher Bell is just a super consistent and strong driver who knows how to go out there, get some really good points finishes, and I believe we'll see Christopher Bell getting a few wins this year.
Yeah, I think if you had to write down any Toyota driver to get a win this season, I think Christopher Bell's at the top of the list. I think since the debut of the next-gen car, Christopher Bell, maybe you can argue Denny Hamlin, but I think Christopher Bell has been the best Toyota driver that we've seen, obviously with multiple wins. And then this season, I've been writing about it in the story that we'll release tomorrow about this race that we are talking about. Christopher Bell has not surprised me by any stretch of the imagination. He is one of the best drivers in not just Toyota camp, but I think he's one of the best drivers in all of NASCAR. And he finished, I believe, third at the Daytona 500, had a terrible start, unfortunately, at Auto Club, getting caught up in a wreck, finishing 32nd. And then I believe he finished fifth at Las Vegas, and then he finishes sixth here today. He's one of the only drivers that has been consistently up there besides the Auto Club incident, obviously. So doesn't surprise me at all. I think Christopher Bell will win numerous races this season. I don't know, maybe he'll be the first Toyota driver to win. I wouldn't be surprised, though, next week at Atlanta. A lot of the Toyota drivers are known for their super speedway talent. So I guess it's one of those things we got to wait and see. But to answer your question, the way Christopher Bell has been going these past couple seasons, this does not surprise me at all. And obviously, as a NASCAR person, you look forward to seeing driver success, especially at a young age. And Christopher Bell is one of those drivers that can take over this series and possibly win a Cup Series championship within the next couple of years.
Well, let's cap off this NASCAR segment by bringing it all full circle with Hendrick Motorsports. Alex Bowman, as I mentioned earlier, is the only driver with a top 10 finish in every race this season. All 4 cars from Hendrick Motorsports from a top 10 today, but the team currently faces some uncertainty. NASCAR took the hood louvers from all 4 HMS cars for further examination after practice Friday. The hood louvers are vents you see for cooling and are considered a single source supplied part of next-gen cars. So, Matthew, do you believe we might see a penalty, potentially maybe even some disqualifications regarding Hendrick Motorsports in the coming days?
It's going to be an interesting thing. I was going to make a terrible joke about cooling and how these Chevrolets and these sports we've been covering, obviously with the supercars disqualification, had something to do with the cooling system. But Hendrick Motorsports has been so dominant, maybe something is going on. I'm not going to speculate, though. There's been, I believe, 3 100-point penalties with, was it Kevin Harvick in the playoffs, and then Michael McDowell, and then I believe it was Brad Keselowski last season. All of them had huge 100-point fines. I'll feel if this does happen where each of the Hendrick Motorsport drivers, and I believe Justin Haley for Colleague Racing was another driver that had his hood loose confiscated. I would feel bad for Chase Elliott in this situation because he's sitting at home like, why are we taking 100 owners points away from my car? I haven't been in it in a couple races, but it's going to be an interesting couple days for us here at Grid Network and NASCAR people around. I mean, we just saw Hendrick Motorsports dominate once again. They had a 1-2-3 finish the previous week. This week they finished 1-2-9-10. Just an incredible start to them. But maybe if we see something happen over the next couple of days, maybe we'll have to change our opinions on how this season has been going for them. I think we might see a penalty, but at the same time, I don't know. I mean, last time Kobe and I, we tried to predict penalties. We were just completely wrong. So it happens. We can say it'll be a 100-point penalty. Maybe they'll only get 25 points. I remember Byron with the whole Hamlin incident did get penalized last season. Him and then Ty Gibbs on pit road with Ty Dillon. So maybe it could be a lesser penalty like that. But you never know until NASCAR decides. That's all I can really say to sum it up. Is we don't know.
Yeah, but we never really know. And my internet froze.
We might have Kobe back here. Kobe, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now. Yep.
Yeah. My internet froze for a second, but as I was saying, totally agree with Matthew. We never really know until NASCAR that decides. I would be really surprised if we saw a disqualification. I personally level. Probably if we get a penalty or because it wasn't necessary. So,
it looks like we might be losing Kobe again here, but I think he's agreeing with you, Matthew, in that disqualification is probably unlikely. But we know NASCAR doesn't mess around with these single source parts here of a next gen car. We've seen several harsh penalties handed down for modifications of those in the past. So I wouldn't be surprised if something comes of this, but then again, maybe they'll look at it and see that it wasn't necessarily what they thought. I guess we'll just have to wait and see for some news to be announced later this coming week. And of course, we'll have a full report on that. Kobe will have a full report on that actually on Grid Tonight on Wednesday. If any news breaks, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube not to miss any of our programs. We are going to move on to Supercars momentarily. It looks like we might have lost Kobe entirely here, so we'll give him a second to come back. Supercars, speaking of penalties, they had a penalty where they saw the race 1 winner and second place finisher disqualified. And it looks like we might have Kobe back now to tell us all about that. Or maybe not. I don't know. Joe, do you want to take this one? We're going to kind of play this by ear here. I know Joe.
Well, that's what I was going to say with the supercar action. It was something else where we saw, a very exciting race 1. And just like what NASCAR had done last year, brand new generation of car. So overall, this first race was really great. But then, of course, you started talking about the big penalty. Shane Van Gisbergen took the win. We all thought, especially if you're playing pick a winner, you got some points. And boy, did that turn into something else. Matthew, I know we could talk a lot about that penalty, but I guess we should give everyone the full update, and especially before we get into that second race coverage.
Yeah, and absolutely. So before getting into this race 2 coverage, we want to update you guys on a story we discussed yesterday regarding the protests being made by Red Bull Ampol Racing. Shane Van Gisbergen crossed the finish line first to win the opening race of the 2023 Supercar season, something we maybe expected here with our pick a winner picks, which we'll discuss. But the 4 teams, Tick Ford Racing and Walkinshaw Andretti United, I apologize, launched protests against the Triple Eight operation for violations related to the driver's cooling system, which I alluded to the terrible joke that I did not make. But race officials decided the protests were valid and decided to disqualify both Shane Van Gisbergen and Brock Freeney from race 1, promoting Cam Waters from Tickford as the race winner, with SVG and Feeney 1-2 finish just disappearing. And the new race 1 podium is Waters, Chaz Moster, and Brody Kostecki. Red Bull Racing, I'm combining words now, announced they will appeal the disqualifications. We have not heard anything yet, but we will obviously keep you updated. But instead of leaving Newcastle with SVG as the points leader and Feeney in a good position, Mostert is leading the championship entering the Grand Prix weekend in Melbourne. Mostert leads Kostecki by 45 points. SVG is 11th in points, 126 points down. So for you, Joe, were you surprised that both of the Red Bull Chevrolet Camaros were disqualified? And do you think this will end up hurting SVG's quest for his 4th championship later this season?
To start off with his championship quest, it's a setback. So it's not great, but it's so early, 30-plus races. I see him being a contender, especially when it comes to race 2, how he handled it. That team is way too good. It's just really interesting because hearing the details about this penalty, how they claim the head race official said they could do this verbally, but the technical regulation says differently. I would not be surprised if maybe we see a reversal of the penalty. Was there really a competitive game? Does the Supercar Series really want to stick to the letter of the rules and what they have there? That's going to be, I think, the big question around the hearing for this appeal. And at the end, it's just going to be something where for Shane Van Gisbergen, it's a setback. Did it hurt his championship hopes? No, he is just way too good, and I think Kobe would agree with that as well.
Yeah, Joe. I think Shane Van Gisbergen is just way too good, and the best team in Supercars, Red Bull Ampol Racing, is still the best team with the best driver. And in both races, Shane Van Gisbergen was on a tear this weekend. So even if their appeal doesn't end up working at the end of the day, it's still not going to hurt SVG. I think he's still going to go out there win most of the races this season and probably end up claiming his fourth Supercars championship. And like you were saying, Joe, it's just a setback more than anything, just a really small setback. And although he's 11th in points, it's just the first race week, and we have an entire season to go. So I think as SVG is certainly going to go out there and do SVG things as we've seen. And in the statement that Red Bull Ampol Racing put out, it says that Triple Eight is disappointed in the decision handed down by Motorsport Australia, resulting in the disqualification of both Red Bull Ampol Racing cars from race 1 of the Newcastle 500, and we have lodged notices of our intention to appeal for both cars. The team sought permission from the Supercars head of motorsport prior to race 1 of the Supercars Championship, which was granted, and we acted upon their permission. This was not a performance enhancement method, but a driver safety tool. Our team ethos is to race hard and fair every time we hit the track. Our full focus is on today's race in Newcastle, and today's race was actually yesterday, referring to race 2. And now moving on to race 2 itself, we saw pretty much the same thing on Saturday with Shane Van Gisbergen taking the checker flag, but he got to keep it this time around. SVG was on fresher tires, catching Mostert, who had more laps on his tires. The pace of the number 97 Chevrolet Camaro was unmatched. Van Gisbergen made a move to the right of Mostert. The two made contact, and SVG got the lead, never looked back. Mostert gave SVG a friendly nudge in retaliation to voice his displeasure. Initially, some wondered if the contact could result in another penalty for the Red Bull Ampol Racing driver. Joe, do you agree with race control for not giving a penalty to SVG, and how exciting was it to watch two of the best drivers in supercars duking it out for the win?
It was very exciting to see the two of them battling for the win. And this is what I think a lot of folks were hoping for last year with these two drivers. If we could see those two battling out all year long, we got ourselves a great championship battle. And Chaz Mostert, I mean, he has a lot of potential. He has won the Bathurst 1000. He has a lot of good victories in Supercar Series. That team just needs to perform and step up, and they really showed it. The battle was just really great. I think everyone saw it as hard racing between two very competitive drivers. I'm glad we did not see a penalty. I know the last thing Shane Van Gisbergen would want is two penalties to cost him two wins. This was just really hard racing. And what was really fun, hearing the crowd there, over 120,000 fans in attendance for those 2 days at Newcastle's on the street course, and to hear them cheering their drivers and cheering these two drivers battling out, it was a fun experience. And this is just what makes supercar racing great. No penalties, physical racing, but these two drivers, they race each other hard, but they didn't cross the line like we see other drivers do in other series. Very fun to and very enjoyable.
Yeah, totally. It was a very enjoyable finish there between Chaz Mostert and Shane Van Gisbergen. And after reviewing the replay multiple times, it really looked like Chaz Mostert had drifted just slight right of SVG. I mean, you could say SVG could have lifted there, but heck, he's a racing driver. And plus, since we had a red flag at the very at the very beginning, we didn't get to run the full distance. They capped it to 18 minutes after the hour because they were going to run out of time to complete the race in the schedule window. So they decided to end it then. We were like minutes away from the checkered flag, and SVG is definitely not going to lift there. Yeah, so it really looked like, like you're saying, with Chaz drifting slight right and SVG didn't lift, and they got together, made contact. I felt like it was a fair play, and I thought the series did a really good job by not over officiated and penalizing SVG. That was certainly quite a battle there between him and Chaz Mostert. And one of the traditional front-running teams didn't have a good opening weekend of the 2023 season. The Shelby Power Ford Mustangs from Dick Johnson Racing in the preseason, there was some concerns that Ford wouldn't be able to match Chevrolet following the testing that occurred prior to Newcastle. It's safe to say that those concerns are gone now, with both manufacturers looking good. But with DJR drivers Anton De Pasquale and Will Davison, they didn't have hardly anything to smile about this week. In race 1, Davison finished 11th and De Pasquale in 16th. In race 2, another 16th place finish for De Pasquale, and Davison was down in 19th. That's an uncharacteristic performance by one of the top teams in supercars. We understand this early in the season with the regulations change. Some teams might fall a step behind the competition. Should any concerns from the Ford teams about performance be put to rest now? And if Dick Johnson Racing struggles after the Grand Prix races at Albert Park, could it be a long year for De Pasquale and Davison?
When it comes to the Ford teams, I think they have to feel pretty good seeing how essentially we saw Chaz Mostert, some of the other drivers up front. But with Dick Johnson Racing, as you said, they just seem to struggle, and they just don't seem to be at 100% championship level they had when that partnership with Penske, and of course had Scott McLaughlin. Scott McLaughlin got all those wins, led him to the championship. But it seems once he left, Penske, left his part of the team, it just seems to be like that team is just missing something. And it just seems like they don't have that chemistry going right for them. Last year was an all right year, but they were still miles behind Triple Eight Racing. Seeing them struggle, it just starts to make me think, if we don't see a turnaround with that team, we might see a change in the organization. This is something we see in a lot of motorsports categories. I could think of like in kart where we saw Penske went from the top to where they struggled. Then they had to make a mass switch from Mercedes to Honda. We've seen other teams in the Cup Series, they're up top. Then they seem to have struggled, have a lot of changes. If they don't seem to have a good season, I anticipate they'll see a lot of changes for 2024 because this is a great organization. They should be up front, contending for wins. Something's missing, though. They need to work on it. And I would not be surprised if it is a long year for those two, that you're going to see quite a lot of changes in the road, especially as we get closer to 2024.
Yeah, certainly, Joe. And you remember, in the last couple of years with Dick Johnson Racing, who were they aligned with? Team Penske. And when Team Penske left Supercars and took Scott McLaughlin with them to the United States to race in the NTT IndyCar Series, we've really seen a drop in performance. And, many times you'd say Dick Johnson Racing and Red Bull Ampol Racing, were like neck and neck on the exact same level. Some weeks Red Bull Ampol was just slightly better than them. On other weeks, Dick Johnson Racing was better. However, since Penske and McLaughlin left, it seems like, Red Bull Ampol is tier A, and then Dick Johnson Racing had been, like tier B, a step behind on a day when things didn't go right for Shane Van Gisbergen. And then you saw Will Davison or Anton De Pasquale who was able to step up and get the win there. So, considering that this team is usually right behind Feeney and Van Gisbergen, it's really surprising to see them come out to Newcastle and perform as poorly as they did. And yes, it's just one race weekend. This is still in the very early days of the Gen 3 era. So we're going to have to give them some time to develop that program, this car, and see what they're able to do. And I think if we get to the Grand Prix races at Melbourne when they're going to be down there with Formula One like they always do, if we get by those races and they have a bunch of poor finishes in all the races that they're going to have there, then that's when they should start feeling, some concern that, wow, we really missed it to start off this new era. And it could be a very long season. And you bring up a good point, Joe, when a team is not performing up to standards, Dick Johnson is a major name in Australian motorsports. And if you're not performing up to those standards, there are probably going to be some changes over the off season. I think you're muted, Matthew.
That actually marks the first time in my Grid Network time here that I have done such a thing. But we're bringing back Ben. We're bringing back myself. Kind of a quiet motorsport weekend, one we won't see. It won't be too quiet for the rest of the season as it goes on. But we only had Supercars and NASCAR this week. So we're going to go into our one shining moment, which I'd argue is the second favorite part of everyone's show. Obviously, pick a winner being one, which we will discuss a little bit as well. So starting with you, Joe, we had Supercars, we had NASCAR. What was your one shining moment from this weekend?
I would say my one shining moment, I sort of already mentioned it in my third answer to the Supercar Series race, was what we saw with the crowd there. Huge crowd. This race had been held since the pandemic started in 2020. We've gone a couple seasons without this event. To see it come back, that full size, the fans were into it. You could see them all over, and over 120,000 in attendance for 2 days for a motorsport event on a street course. That's a good sign, and it just added to excitement. I just love the combination of hearing those brand new Gen 3 supercars, their engines, seeing them drive around the track, and hearing the crowd cheering as you have some great battles on the track and great moments. That's my one shine moment. That's always, I think, some of the best parts of racing, just seeing the enthusiasm from the crowd on full display.
Well, it was hard last week in light of Hendrick Motorsports running so well and running up in the top three to not notice Josh Berry's 29th place finish in relation to where his Hendrick teammates were running. I know obviously it's a very difficult situation with that car right now and Chase Elliott being out. He got a very late call up to fill in. I think now having a week to prepare for this race, he certainly made the most of it. And he found a way through all the overtime chaos and restart chaos on the final laps there at Phoenix to come home with a top 10. I'm going to give my one shining moment to Josh Berry, a true underdog story in terms of somebody who's gotten up to the Cup Series the old-fashioned way. And I know that this is not the way he would have wanted to pick up his first Cup Series top 10, but he's somebody that has worked so hard, nickel and dimed his way to every opportunity, finally got his big break and big opportunity with Junior Motorsports, and is now making the most of an opportunity here with Hendrick in Cup. So well done to Josh Berry on the top 10. That's my one shining moment this weekend.
And although he didn't get the race victory, I'm going to give my one shining moment to the driver of the number 4 Ford Mustang, Kevin Harvick. Harvick's had a really strong start to the 2023 season, finishing 12th, 5th, 9th, and 5th. That's really impressive from Harvick. And when we look at, highly notable and successful athletes of their respective sport in their final season, all of them would love to go out on top with a championship. And in some cases, we've seen them, in their last year not be able to do that. And I use this example many times on Grid Network. Everybody can't be Peyton Manning, get a Super Bowl, and just ride off into the sunset. And based on the form we've seen so far from Kevin Harvick this season, he's very well looking like he could emerge as a championship contender in his last year at the Cup level. He'd been able to go out there, take the lead from Kyle Larson. If it hadn't been for the caution, it looked like he was going to win here at Phoenix, a track that's been really good to him over the years, and punch his ticket to the postseason. But although it didn't get the victory, I think Harvick has to feel really pleased. I know it's been a struggle for the most part for Stewart-Haas in 2023, and Harvick's been, carrying the anchor on his back for this team so far. But minus Eric Almirola, Stewart-Haas racing had a really great day with Chase Briscoe and Ryan Preece as well. I think the entire organization has to be happy after this race where they're heading in terms of Harvick. I think he's a driver who we're really gonna have to continue to watch throughout the season, because I think he can certainly win a few races and potentially put himself in position once we come back here in November for that championship race. Maybe we could see Harvick in the championship 4. Could you imagine if Kevin Harvick has an opportunity to come to Phoenix in November and potentially race for a championship? That would be, one of the most perfect storybook endings in NASCAR.
Absolutely. And I also make sure you guys comment in the chat room what your one shining moment is. I have 2. I know I'm not supposed to. I feel like I'm cheating the system, but one of them is obviously Kevin Harvick. I'll be discussing in my future story that will be published soon about this past race. Kevin Harvick's history is one of them. I still consider it the peanut butter cheeseburger day. This was the 20th straight race that Kevin Harvick had finished in the top 10. He has an average finish of 4.05 in his last 20 races at this track. 9 wins. He has extended this record. And in addition to this record, Kevin Harvick also has 41 straight races at Phoenix without a DNF. And considering, if you look back in time, his first race here was in October of 2001. I was a few months old, so considering he has not DNF'd here, also want to shout out Eric Almirola, 25 straight races at Phoenix without a DNF. So Kevin Harvick making his history is definitely my first shining moment. The second one I do want to mention really quick is, considering I dropped something with the manufacturer, like I talked about last week, Chevrolet winning 4 races to start the Cup Series season. First time since 2001, when guess who? Chevrolet did it again. They have a little bit of way to go. In 1995, Chevrolet started the season by winning the first 7 races. So that's brought to you by Trey Ryan 99 on Twitter. Once again, incredible stats by him. So Chevrolet is my second shining moment. Kevin Harvick making history with the peanut butter cheeseburger reference. That's also a shining moment. So, yeah, so like I said, please encourage you commenting below what your one shining moment is. Maybe it's the same as us. Maybe you're going a little different route, but I will throw it over to Joe.
Now, this past race weekend was very eventful for Pick a Winner. It started with a bunch of folks scoring a point when Shane Van Gisbergen got race 1. However, he got disqualified, so he and second place Brock Feeney lost their positions, but then nobody scored a point in race 1. Now, this is different from the Rolex 24, which we heard of some post-race penalties from the Rolex 24, but it did not result in the Meyer-Shank Racing team being disqualified. They still kept their win. They even kept their Rolex watches, but the points went out, so that's how it works. In this case, since the 2 drivers were disqualified, lost their wins, that's how we can pick a winner. Nobody picked William Byron. And then, of course, everyone, again, still picked Shane Van Gisbergen for race 2. He got it done. So that is the updated one. But, of course, we'll be following if there's any changes to the penalty and the appeal from Triple Eight Racing. Edward still leads, but it has shrunk. We still got several folks tied for second place, third place. Still very early, and next weekend is a great weekend. Formula One, IMSA, Sebring 12 Hours, NASCAR at Atlanta, and World Rally Championship in Mexico. Anyone in the top 6 can tie Edward if he was to get 0 points. And you too, if you're watching us, could enter, pick a winner, comment with who you think is going to win each race. We post on social media each and every week. And I know that was just something else. I don't recall having it where I think when Denny Hamlin got disqualified in Pocono last year, I think we had one person pick Chase Elliott, so they inherited. But I've never had a situation where a bunch of folks lost a point because the winner got disqualified.
I just can't believe Ed still has that gigantic lead that he's got. I mean, this guy's our Formula E expert. He only comes on a few times a year to talk about Formula E with us, but he's just started playing the game. I don't know how closely he follows NASCAR. He picked Chase Elliott to win originally. I actually mentioned to him on Twitter, Elliott's injured right now. You might want to go with somebody else. I think he picked Ryan Blaney. He almost got a point again because Blaney finished second today. So he's on a complete roll here. I don't know what's going to take for one of us to catch him here, but well done to Ed. But I know we're all trying to close that gap.
And it's the answer is Edward has the script. He doesn't want to acknowledge it, but he does. It's that simple. As guys like myself who have been pick a winner, I've scored points. I still have not scored a NASCAR point, and that's why I'm here. It's just very unfortunate circumstances for us. But Edward, I think he was toying with us. I think he knew what he was doing deep down. I sound like Joshua right now. I think he knew what he was doing, but he picked Ryan Blaney to show that he still means business. But Kobe and I, we would have one more point. We're inching closer and closer, but I'm confident. I really feel like this penalty might be overturned. So I think Kobe and I are going to jump once again, and we're getting closer, Edward. If you're watching, we're coming for you, and we have a long season to go. But yeah, it's incredible start for him, though, being an expert in one sport and just dominating everyone in all sports. It's just truly an incredible thing. I'm very happy to see one of our own leading the standings, but we still got a long way to go.
Yeah, Matthew. Hopefully that SVG victory for race 1 will get restored so we can pick up another point here. And you mentioned the script. I wish it was in the script for tonight's show for my internet to be as fast as Xfinity 10G, but unfortunately, I don't think that's ever going to be in the script.
Internet gremlins, but definitely we encourage everyone, be sure to participate and pick a winner each and every week. You could be on the leaderboard, and as said, Edward, our Formula E expert from Formula E Zone. Check out Formula E Zone. Great folks over there. He has just been on a winning streak. Definitely will be so exciting to see who can catch up and pass him. And, of course, it'll be very exciting if you become one of our new Patreon subscribers. Come on the show, Mark, Robert, and David. They are all on our Patreon investors list. They invest in us each and every month. We get to $500 a month, we can start sending folks to the track regularly. We already got some plans to have some folks in the track, including, of course, the Portland race weekends, but we want to expand that. We want to be nationwide, even internationally, help us get there. And, of course, you could do buy me a coffee. So you want to do a one-time contribution, big or small, you could do that. Less than 5 minutes. Click on that link. We'll thank you on the air and display your name as these fine folks did. And several of those fine folks bought coffee for our on-air team for the Daytona 500 pre-race. And, of course, be sure to follow us, Grid Ranking, on Twitter. Go visit gridranking.com each and every week. Matthew has the newest article from the NASCAR Cup Series. And hit that subscribe button right here on YouTube. We're less than 25 subscribers away from 600. We're getting closer to our goal of 1,000 subscribers before the Indianapolis 500. We are getting there, and we thank everyone for tuning in. Like, comment with your opinions, and share with your friends that watch motorsports. Busy weekend. Monday, Grid Encore with Ben Schneider. We also have Casey Campbell and Brandon joining us as they recap the Phoenix weekend for the ARCA Menard Series and the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Then don't forget, Wednesday, Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsports news program, 6 p.m. Eastern. And be sure to follow us on social media as we post the new Pick a Winner each and every Wednesday. Then Friday, Women in Motorsports, myself, Daniel, Ben, will all be there recapping some of the top female racers from this past race weekend. And then we do this all over again next Saturday, Grid Life pre-race, and then right here on Grid Life wrap-up. For Ben Schneider, Matthew Bro, Kobe Lambis from the Podium Finish, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.